Hi, my name's Rich Harrington.
And I'm Ian Robinson.
And we're the co-authors of a new book called Motion Graphics with Adobe Creative Suite 5 Studio Techniques. And in it, we take a look at a lot of cool things you could do with Adobe After Effects and the entire Creative Suite. Recently, of course, Adobe updated the Creative Suite with the .5 version, and I think one of the coolest features has to be WarpStabilizer. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, basically, if you're ever in that environment where you're kind of running and gunning and trying to grab that shot without necessarily having, a dolly or a really complex over-the-shoulder rig, you can use WarpStabilize to actually get that look with your shot.
Yeah, it's really good. It's going to go through and give you more options. Of course, we had stabilization in earlier versions of After Effects, but you always had to figure out where are we going to put those little control points and look for tracking points. And sometimes that was hard because something would move through the scene in front of your tracking point, or it would go off screen and then you'd see the tracking data go and it'd go crazy.
Yeah.
Well, After Effects sort of said, you know what? There's lots of tracking solutions. You want to go that method, you can, but most of the time you're just looking to stabilize a shot.
Yeah, and definitely. I mean, that's one of the big keys with the WarpStabilizer. When you drop a piece of footage in, you just kind of look at it and you're like, man, that's kind of shaky. I want to smooth that out.
Yeah.
And literally all you have to do is drop it on there and then start going.
So we've got the track selected. We'll just choose Animation, Stabilize Motion. And it tells you what it's doing. First step, analyzing in the background.
There we go.
Now, one of the things I like to point out is that if you look at that, it takes a second, it'll kick in, but you'll actually see progress over here in the effect, and it tells you what it's doing.
Yeah, that's always a good thing.
Yeah. So it's running, already finished, and now it's stabilizing.
Right.
Now, the cool thing about this effect is that you're not locked out. Like, while that's going, you can keep working. So if you want to set up another shot to stabilize and jump back, so you're not really, unlike other stabilizing effects or like a RAM preview where you sort of have to like wait for After Effects to catch up, this just runs.
Yeah, yeah. And that's honestly 5.5 as a whole. There's so many different things that you can just add in and keep moving. But let's get back to the stabilizer.
Sure. So we have two options. We have smooth motion or no motion. And the key here is that stabilizing is really an effect. Sometimes you want to lock a shot down. You want no motion whatsoever. You meant for it to look like it was on a tripod. Maybe you would put the camera, on a flat surface and you're trying to handhold it, or you're cradling it, but you weren't locked off on a tripod. Or maybe you're on a moving subject and it just felt a little unstable. So for that case, you could choose no motion, and it's going to analyze the image and attempt to lock it down. Once you've done that, you'll see that there's a couple of methods. The position method is the old one that just shifted it around, or you can tell it to scale and rotate to keep a stable platform. That's, again, pretty typical. But then we got these new ones, perspective and subspace warp. Can you tell us a little bit about them?
Yeah, perspective is really kind of a cool thing. Those of you who've come from a still photography background might appreciate the ability to actually adjust for the lens distortion that happens when you actually shoot an image. Well, with WarpStabilizer, you can actually fix any lens distortion using the perspective option. Okay. But subspace warp is even more interesting because when you apply subspace warp, After Effects will go in and look pixel by pixel and actually try and smooth out any corrections that actually happen. So you don't get any of this strange tearing or anything that may happen within the image.
So we'll do this here first off with perspective, and it's going to sort of rotate the image as needed in 3D space and do a little bit of movement, but it's doing it to it as a whole, right? So we're not seeing selective distortion there.
Right.
If we flip that over to subspace warp, it'll actually adjust the foreground and background independently. Now, one of the things I want to point out here is, we're going to look at this and you go, well, that's fine. It's just a locked off shot. Well, it didn't actually start that way.
That's right.
If you want to see what you've done, what I recommend is you go in here and you say, oh, just show me the position only and say stabilize only. And when you do that, you get an idea of how much it's actually moving around by those black boxes.
Totally. You can see it right on the edges.
Yeah, a lot of little bounce in there. And we've obviously fixed that. So, we'll go here back to subspace warp and, it's working pretty well. And, again, it locks it in. It's done the stabilize. Watch how much correction actually happened with the shot. You see it's bending and warping that square.
Yeah, it's totally amazing.
Yeah. And, of course, to get to something usable, after you've proven to your client, wow, that was worth the upgrade, boss. You can go in and say, all right, well, let's just take that back here, and we're going to do stabilize, crop, and auto scale. Or what's this other option?
stabilize and synthesize edges. I mean, this is really cool. If you've ever used that feature in Photoshop where it automatically fills in content aware, that's kind of like that, but for the edges of your stabilize.
And what you got to do here is you can adjust the range and the feather of that edge, and you just want to sort of go in here and you actually start to crop in a little bit. When you do that, it's going to analyze the frames and it will attempt to fill those automatically. But you do have to sort of crop in a little bit for the synthetic edges to kick in. That's fine. Very time intensive, but works well. Most cases though, you're just going to use that crop and auto scale. And as that runs through, it does a great job here. It locked that down with no motion.
Yeah, no, I wish I'd had this even a year ago.
Yeah. Now, you can also use this in other situations where you have a high motion shot and you want to keep some of that motion in. Here we've got a handheld shot with fast action, and I'm just going to go ahead and stabilize the motion, let it kick in on that analysis. Again, it's going to give us sort of a play-by-play of how many frames are happening. And in this case, we're going to go with smooth motion. Now, while that's processing here, I'm not going to turn it on because it's a bit intensive, but you actually have a detailed analysis option, which gives you rolling shutter reduction. Can you describe what's happening with rolling shutter?
Well, a lot of times when you're shooting and if it's a high motion area with rolling shutter, sometimes you can end up with kind of a stuttering effect.
And you also get bending lines because of the sort of the CMOS or the progressive loading sensors as it doesn't refresh quick enough from down to bottom.
Right. And so what you can do is actually, instead of choosing automatic, when you go to enhance, that analyzes the image much more critically and helps with any of the reduction in quality that you might see with some of that rolling or some of that effect.
Yeah, if you're getting sort of unwanted bending in your lines or fast movement and you've got strong vertical lines, they look like they're sort of bending as they go through the frame, this could go ahead and selectively warp those back to remove some of that distortion. Now, let's just take in a second. This is a bit of a long clip with a lot of motion here. While that's running, let me just go ahead and load this clip up, and you'll actually sort of see what's happening here. And here's the original shot, and you'll see that there's a lot of motion. It's handheld, sort of a whip pan over. You know, there's a lot happening here. Now, it's a little stuttery because we're pushing the computer pretty hard here.
Right.
But if we come back on over, and we'll take a look there at the effect controls, you see it's just about done processing. Nice, you get a status update.
Yep.
I like these little estimates. About 1 minute. I can go get coffee now. I'll come right back.
Of course.
Yeah. Do you remember the old days when you used to be able to walk around with a button? Like I actually had a button that said, "Leave me alone, I'm rendering."
Yeah. People would come up to me and go, "Oh, you're on your render walk." I'm like, "Yeah, of course I'm on my render walk."
Yeah. So we used to be able to get away with that. Well, guess what? Stabilizing footage takes a while. It's pretty intense math. So if you miss those days of actually being able to take render walks or render smokes or, render coffee breaks, you can get them back. But
That's
it's
right.
it is pretty fast. And obviously we're running this on a laptop here. If you got a faster machine, multi-threaded, lots of RAM, After Effects CS 5.5 is a 64-bit app. So if you go ahead and you load it up, I like to say 2 to 3 gigs of RAM per core, you get some good speed.
Most definitely.
All right, so that's done there. Now it's doing the stabilizing. Let's just go ahead and frame that up. And the key here is, of course, the ability to actually tone this back. So if we say, you know what, smooth that out, and let's do about a 70% smoothness, you're going to see, obviously, I had to scale up the shot. It tells you it's scaled up about 123%.
Yep.
Not bad. I like that it's smart enough that it only scales up how much it needs.
Right. I also like the fact when you apply this and it's actually going through all these computations, there's a lot of caching that's going on in the background in 5.5. So as you make adjustments to the smoothness and other parameters, a lot of times After Effects doesn't have to go back and recompute everything. It can just pull some of the data out of the cache and then, speed things along as you make your adjustments.
I mean, that looks beautiful for a 70% smooth. We still have that energy of the shot.
Yeah.
But look at how it looks like it's a perfect track of her. I mean, I look like a much better photographer. Let's go ahead. Let's back that down a little bit. Let's go down to, say, 30%. And like you were saying, it's got that material cache, so it already finished.
Yeah, there we go.
So, the benefit there with that caching is that it doesn't take nearly as long to invoke the previews. And so there we have a little bit more of the handheld energy and the bounce and wiggle. But I mean, that's a complex scene.
Yeah, no, that's a lot of stuff going on. Lots of colors, lots of contrast, lots of people.
Objects passing in front and back, it didn't get confused. There were no tracks to point. Well, let me set that back. There's lots of points to track. I didn't have to pick them.
That's right.
And actually, After Effects probably has like upwards of 500 points that it's tracking here.
Yep.
So, well, that's just one of the things. And in the book, of course, we cover how to stabilize footage, how to fix it. We got lots of chapters with design ideas, but we wanted to get you up to speed on some of the cool things with After Effects 5.5. We also have a bonus chapter coming out for the book. What are some of the things you're going to cover in that?
Well, in the bonus chapter, we're actually going to cover how to create an entire package for your show, whether it's a podcast or whether it's, broadcast. So with that, we're going to look at definitely a lot of the new features in 5.5, but we're also going to cover daily workflow tips that will help speed up your workflow while utilizing the power of all the different applications. So definitely make sure to check that out.
Yeah, and that's one of the best benefits of the book. So make sure you check out the book, Motion Graphics with Adobe Creative Suite 5, Studio Techniques, where Ian and I share with you a bunch of things that we do every day in our workplace and how we use the entire Creative Suite to get great results when it comes to design. Thanks for joining us.